Our guest for this episode is Amaia Gabantxo. She spoke about Basque language, literature, and translations. Amaia is a writer, singer, and literary translator who specializes in Basque literature. She is the most prolific translator of Basque literature to date, as well as a pioneer in the field, and has received multiple awards for her work, among them a Wingate Scholarship, the OMI Writers Translation Lab Award, a Mellon Fellowship for Arts and Scholarship, and an Artist in Residence Award at the Cervantes Institute in Chicago. She has published and performed on both sides of the Atlantic, in Ireland and Great Britain, where she carried out her university education, and in the US, where she lived until 2020. She now splits her time between the US and the Basque Country, where she spends much time freediving and recording the sounds of the Kantauri Sea. To know more about her, you can visit the website given in the show notes. To give your feedback on this episode, please review Harshnayam podcast on Spotify or Apple apps. Welcome to our podcast, Amaia. Thank you for coming over.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very happy to be here.
You told me that your serious literary journey started with a portrait of Dorian Gray.
I was one of those sickly children, right? I always had tonsillitis. They couldn't fix it for about 4 or 5 years. I was like mostly in bed. Like I didn't go to school very much. So I read a lot. And in that time, like I transitioned from children's books to grown-up books, but it was accidental. And then it was with the portrait of Dorian Gray, because I had basically read all of the children's books in our house. And my mom, who was like really, her patience was stretched very thin with my reading habits. She was really tired of buying me books. And then she thought, look, you know what? You can just read one of mine. And she gave me this huge tome that contained 5, I think the title was like cinco novelas clásicas inglesas, I think 5 classical English novels. And I remember it had the portrait of Dorian Gray, which is the one that I read first. And then it had Tess Doverville, Vanity Fair, Wuthering Heights, and one more.
How old were you then?
I was 11. And I just picked up, my mom is crazy, picked up the portrait of Dorian Gray just because I liked the title. And I read this book and my brain exploded because I was like, oh my God, books can be like this. You can write things like this. And then immediately I wanted to be a writer because I thought you can create worlds as strange and magical and deranged as this one and make it beautiful and gripping. And it's not like the famous 5 or the Hollisters I used to read as well. It was like much more complex and rich. And it was a huge awakening. I found not that long ago, I found some things that I had written as a 7-year-old.
Oh.
There was this story that I had written. It's actually like pretty dark. This child that goes to a funeral because somebody dies. And in the funeral, everybody dies of, what was it? Sorrow and pity. And she's the only one alive. And then, so there are all these funerals for all these other people. And then in all these funerals, everybody dies of sorrow and pity. And continuously, she's like the only one left. And then this she is me, obviously. And then she's wandering the world alone, wondering why is everybody dying of sorrow and pity? And I'm not. So I don't know what that says about my 7-year-old self. But I found that and I thought, wow, let us not show this to a psychologist.
So as a 7-year-old, you wrote a dystopian story. Wonderful.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Then you moved to Ireland from Spain, right?
Yeah. I wanted to go to university in Granada, in the south of Spain, to the Escuela de Traductores, the translators school. That's what it's called. It's the most famous in Spain, where you can train to become a translator. And I was gifted with languages, and I thought I saw a way there for me, and I wanted to go to that university. But in order to enter, I had to pass all these really demanding exams. So my family decided to send me off to Ireland for 6 months to get like a sort of like fully immersive time there, living with the family and studying English to get this diploma that I needed also to enter that course. So while I was doing that in Ireland, I was in Northern Ireland actually, I had a very good teacher because I was doing this Cambridge exams for accreditation to English language accreditation to go to the Escuela de Traductores. And my teacher said, look, your English is so good, you could actually study here. Why don't you apply for these European grants that nobody's applying for? You're sure to get one. And I was like, what? So I did. I applied and I got it. And I ended up staying in Northern Ireland and studying a wonderful degree that I love of English and Irish literature. And I had all these brilliant teachers, and it was defining. I often wonder that decision to study in Ireland changed the entire course of my life. And I'm very grateful for it. I had a very important mentor in those years. It was Professor Robert Welsh, and it was in the last year of my degree. I had written my final year thesis. It was a comparative study between a Basque author and a Northern Irish author, Bernardo Achaga, the Basque one, Bernard McClaverty, the Northern Irish one, and they both wrote about the conflict. And I made a comparative study of their novels. And in writing about the Basque novel, one of the bones of contention was that this translation was carried out from the Spanish translation of the original, not directly from the Basque. So I commented on that as well. And this professor, as he was guiding me, tutoring me through the creation of this final year thesis, he said, this really bothers you. You keep going on about it. And I think that you need to become a translator from Basque into English, because you have obviously been preparing yourself for these last 3-4 years here. And I think you're ready. You can be a translator from Basque into English. It doesn't look like there's anyone doing that. So maybe it should be you. And when he said that, it became obvious to me that, yes, this is what I wanted to do, because I was a writer. I was writing already in English. And I had this burning feeling that this was something that I really could do, and it would honor all of the parts of me to do this work, to translate Basque literature into English. And that's how that started.
So, were there any translators before?
I don't know of anybody, certainly nothing was published that was translated directly from Basque into English. I was the first person to produce work that was translated. And to this day, I'm probably like the person who has translated the most volume of work from Basque into English. Before a full novel, there were like many short stories and poems that were translated here and there. But the first novel was A Perfect Happiness in English, Sorion Perfectua in Basque, by this author I love, Andu Lertxundi. And Andu Lertxundi was someone whose work I had translated a lot for my MA. My MA thesis was about another novel of his that's called Azkenaz Beste. And I wanted to translate that book, Not a Perfect Happiness. I never came up with a definite title in English for Azkenaz Beste because it's a very difficult play on words, that title. But anyway, so I did a lot of work, and my tutor was really impressed with this book, and he put me in contact with some publishers, and they make me just go back and forth so much. And eventually it wasn't that novel that they chose, but they did another one that was a smaller one, and it was about the conflict. So the one that I had chosen wasn't about the Basque conflict, but the one the publisher eventually chose was about the conflict, because this is something that we can get into a very long conversation about. But it's when you're translating from a minoritized culture, from an oppressed culture, from a culture that has a history of struggle and so-called terrorism. In the end, editors, they seek books that deal with that most sonorous aspect of the existence of that culture. And that to me can get really frustrating, because that happened here during a period of time, but that is not the thing that should define us, right? Or define art or literature or books or anything like that. But there's a lot of that.
Now, tell us about the Basque language and literature. What kind of role music plays in Basque culture?
Yes, so the Basque language, Euskara in Basque, it's thought to be probably the oldest language in Europe. It is a language isolate, so it's not related to any other languages, and it has no known relatives. It's non-Indo-European in origin. That already tells us that it's older than other languages. But yes, it has a very peculiar structure. It's very different to any other languages that you may have ever heard or seen. And it's one thing I used to say to my students when I taught Basque at the University of Chicago was, if the Basque language was an object, it would be in the most important museum, it covered under 7 layers of glass, because it's a miracle that this language has survived and that is in such good health, at this point in history, despite the fact that it had so much opposition. So the Basques, we say about ourselves a thing. We say, "Kantatzen duen herria ez da inoiz hilko," and this translates as a country that sings together can never die. The Basque people are very musical. The language itself is musical because it's an agglutinating language, which means that all these suffixes pile up at the end of nouns and verbs and all of this. So because the suffixes pile up at the end, you can imagine this is really good for rhyming and for poetry. You can play with the language a lot. It's also a very synthetic language, which means that you can generate a lot of meaning with very few words. In that case, it's similar to English. Romance languages, for example, are a lot more verbose. They require a lot of long sentences and subclauses. And Basque is much more direct, and the meaning is implied rather than defined. And for that reason, it can be a more ambiguous language. Also, very interestingly, it's a gender neutral language. When you speak, it's not defined whether you're talking about a man or a woman. They're both beta. Either context tells us or you find other ways, but the language itself is gender neutral, which I think it's a really beautiful characteristic. And what I was going to say with regards to the music, because it has that innate rhyming tendency, I think that this makes it a very good language for poetry and for music as well. And Basque people are very musical. A bit like you probably heard that people in Wales are very musical as well. It doesn't take anything to get a Basque person to break into song. Moreover, put a group of Basque people in a room and within minutes they're going to start singing. So in that sense, I come from a very musical family, but I think that probably 85% of all families in the Basque Country are very musical. Somebody sings or plays instruments or is in a choir or all of these things at the same time. So yeah, it's a very musical language. And to me, the sonic quality of the stuff that I produce in my translations is very important. And I'm always tuning in to the musical aspect of the text and trying to replicate those movements.
So when choosing books to translate, do you prefer poetry?
I have more fun translating poetry because I think translating poetry is more musical, indeed. And also, obviously, it takes longer and therefore paid worse. But the process is really beautiful because, you stop to think you stop to look and to think about a poem, and you watch it reveal itself, right? And reveal its many facets and reveal its many families of sound and association, word association that it's playing with. And in that way, you end up having, I don't know how to describe it, like a blooming flower that comes out of the text. And you have to take all the aspects that reveal themselves to you in the original and find ways of making that happen again somehow in English, in your text. So I find it a very gorgeous process. I love it. I enjoy it a lot when it's poetry. I like translating novels, of course, as well. But translating poetry, I know, it's more special for me. I really love it.
You're also part of this Create Tribu project.
Yeah, so this is when I came back to the Basque Country after the pandemic. During the pandemic, I should say. We were in the middle of the pandemic when I finally landed. I was in the USA for almost 9 years, 2011 until 2020. I taught Basque at the University of Chicago. And I taught creative writing at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Yeah, so when I came back here, I felt the need to put together everything that I know and have developed and have learned. And I decided to create an arts and culture nonprofit. This is what Crea Tribu is. The aim with this project is to bring together artists, international artists, with Basque artists to carry out collaborations. For example, last year we collaborated with a choir in Chicago, and we produced a new arrangement of these two beautiful Basque songs, and 4,000 children in Chicago sang this song. We made a video, and all of this was the performance took place in the Pritzker Pavilion, Millennium Park in Chicago, which is like the best venue in the whole city. So it was an amazing thing that we managed to pull through. And then we did another thing with Wales, where we produced the soundscape with Basque song that was played continuously during a festival in Wales. This was in 22, I think. And anyway, and then we get artists and the musicians to come over here, stay with us, and do things with us that we then publish. And likewise, we are hoping in future to be able to hold like artists' residencies. And also, right now, we're looking for a venue. We'll have our own space where we can do all sorts of things. The idea is to help people find a hub for art where we make art and we do different things with art. I love also like collaborations between different types of artists, interdisciplinary collaborations. And just because everywhere I live, I've always been that person who wants to be in the arty neighborhood. And very often, in fact, every time that I have moved to cities like Chicago, New York, London, even in Belfast, because you're an artist, you don't have much money. So you find this neighborhood that's like between a little bit decay and a little bit like there are some artists there. So things are happening. And I realized that it was invariably those neighborhoods were like enriched and really beautified by the presence of artists and artists doing things. So, I mean, this is my hometown fishing village with 18,000 people. And that there was a huge fishing industry here. This was the main industry in the village. But in the 90s, it all started. There's a lot less fish in the sea. And then the newer generations don't want to take on the hard work of being fishermen. It's really hard work. So like that industry has decayed. So I think that at this point, my village is wondering what to become. It doesn't quite know which way to go. Okay. And I thought, if I bring art into the mixture, we will be able to do something good. I don't know exactly how or why, but I know that this will happen. So I'm trying to bring that energy here. And that was the reason why I, with some friends, put together Crea Tribu, which is basically, it means creative tribe.
Now, we will come back to translation. So, are you receiving any support from the government or any organizations which are supporting the translation effort for Basque literature into English?
Yeah, never enough. No, because I think that, and this is a problem that I've spoken about in recent interviews here in the Basque Country, there is no strategy, and we need a strategy. People need to realize that in order to be seen in the world and in order to be understood and empathized with, the art is what brings you to the other side, right? So in that process, literature is one of the very important arms of this revealing who you are to the world. For that reason, and I think that if we wanted indeed to have in universities across the world, because I have taught in universities, so I've seen exactly this need, we need to translate all the classics. We need to have a body of work that will enable students in the UK, in the US, in Australia, in India, to carry out a comparative study, for example, between Basque novels and Northern Irish novels, or Sicilian novels, or I don't care, whatever, but to have that body of work to compare what happens in two different places, perhaps minoritized places, where a new culture begins to emerge after a period of oppression or whatever. Things like that. We don't have that body of work. There are the books that I have done, some of the translators have done as well. They are mostly of contemporary work. And we don't have the classic. It's something that really bothers me, that I see that the institutions don't have the perspective. And if I bring them the perspective, it's like they don't understand or they don't care and they're not helping me do the work. Also, the helps for translation, the rates are too low at government level when they say, oh, we'll pay for the translation. Yeah, but you're going to pay a very low rate. And then they don't give you the full amount for the whole book.
Okay.
So they give you a little bit and they say they'll give you maybe half or 2/3. And they say, then the publisher can pay the rest. But maybe the publisher can't pay the rest. So what, you're not going to get that book done because like you're being too stingy. And
Right.
there's no need to be that stingy. There is enough money in this country because this is a wealthy part of Spain. And that there should be more money allocated for this process. But there isn't the vision, I think, that is required.
So, what are you currently working on, Amaia?
Right now, I'm finishing Unai Elorriaga's Old Maps, Old Dogs, Iazko Ezurrak for Archipelago Books. So I hope to have that finished in the next month or two. And yeah, then I'm working on my own work as well. I'm writing what I call a novel in flamenco form, which is a novel that I'm writing that takes at its point of departure the lyrics of flamenco songs.
Oh.
So each chapter begins with a song and then it evolves on there. And it's like the structure is like a concert.
Beautiful.
So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but the thing that has me like kind of like busiest at the moment, I think, is probably Creatribu. And then also I have a band as well. So there's that. Many things are happening. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah. One of the recent translations you did is the novel called Twist, right? Tell us about Twist and its author.
Twist is a great novel. It's by one of my favorite Basque authors, Arcaiz Cano. Actually, some of his poems I translated a couple of years ago and they are in the Indian Quarterly. So if you wanted to read a couple of poems by Arcaiz Cano, Cano is the surname, they are in the Indian Quarterly.
I'll search for it, yeah.
Yeah. Twist is a novel that deals with a real life case that happened at the height of the Basque conflict. Two very young lads, 19, 20-year-old, they were disappeared by the Spanish police. And their bodies were only recovered 10 years later. It's the Lasan Zavala case. But in the novel, Arcaiz Cano changes the names of the protagonists. He changes everybody's name for obvious reasons. He doesn't want to end up in jail. Looking at it from the journalistic part, from the legal part, the book has all these different registers, right? The journalistic register, the legalese register, and then these surreal parts where the bones are waking and their shallow graves and trying to make sense of what happened. So it has these different strands that are very powerful and it's very poignant in a way. Like, I think that he tries to tell this story in all its bizarre and very painful, but also very infuriating from the point of view of what happened at the legal level, which is like completely illegal, everything that happened. And then also what happened at the journalistic level, because there was like a lot of obfuscation and confusion and all of that. And then what happened at the personal level to the families of these two young people who were disappeared, and then to what happened to them. So it's a very powerful and very beautiful and very painful novel about something that happened here, but has happened in so many other countries in the world as well. I think that anybody who reads it, who has the slightest bit of experience of conflict or even empathy towards places in conflict will be able to find themselves in it, in the shock and the abject horror and then sorrow and the fury at the injustice. and all of it. But yeah, it's a really great novel. I really recommend it. And this was published by Archipelago Books as well.
Now, please read a paragraph in Basque and in English, please, from the book.
I'll read the opening because it's so powerful. Yeah. Gaua da kanpoan. Gaua izatea merezi du. Lurraren erraietan beti da gaua. Satorren ordua da, satorraren domeinuetan. Axola dio, ezer, egun argiak lurpean bizidanari, ez gehiegi. Bat eginda zaude aspaldi honetan lurrarekin, eta batere ez mugitzea zenukela onena iruditu zaizu hasieran. Zure erraiak eta lurrarenak erraiberak ez dira bada. Ahots teluriko batek diotzu. Abandonatu zeure ezurrak betiko, zer arraio. Ez aldira ezurrak, danbor jotzailearentzako makilak, txirulariarentzat txirulak, hainbesteko atxikimendua diezu honezkero timbala kolpatzeko ere nekez balio lezaketen umero pareari eta tibia horiei, nola egongo zara, etzanean baino beto. Lo egin ezinik dabiltzan milaka gizakik eskatu ados egongo dira honetan. Lo zauden orduak dira honenak. Baina hainbeste urte mugitu gabe egoteak ezin du ona izan. Inurriturik dituzun gorputzadarrak dantzatu nahi zenituzke, atz puntak apur bat ez narazi. Albanitu atzetako ezurrak bere lotueratik aska eta haiek raskatu sostera ere kateatu, matraie zuen ordez, aginlariak moldea ateratzeko erabili ohi duen igeltsua ote duzun sentipena. Begiak zabaldu ere kostata, zure artean ezuan oso arteza baltzamatu ninduen morroia. Lurra baino zikuagoa den hauts zuri batek hartua dizu garunaren parte bat, desmemoria, magnesioa, garea. Zenbat denpora behar du gorpu batek usteltzeko? 6, 8, 10 urte? Antropologo forentzeek diotenez, ezetasunaren arabera. Proba egin nahi? Akabatu katu bat eta utzi leioko freskuran, ea. Ezin ezer oroitu. Zuri-zuri duzu burua, tabula rasa egin balizute bezala. It's night outside, or at least it ought to be. In the bowels of the earth it's always night. The mole's hour in the mole's dominion. Do underground dwellers care about daylight? Not much. You've been one with the earth for a while, and at first you thought it best not to move at all. Aren't your bowels and the earth's one and the same? A lyric voice speaks. Abandon your bones now and forever. Who the hell cares? Aren't bones drumsticks for percussionists? Flutes for flutists? Are you really that attached to those humory, those tibiae, which at this point would hardly even rattle a kettle drum? Is there anything better than a cozy lie down? Thousands of worried insomniacs would agree, are the hours of sleep. But all these years of stillness cannot possibly be good. You'd like to dance with those stiffened extremities, awaken the tips of your fingers and toes. If only I could free my fingers from their restraints and tick them together again. You feel that instead of plumping your cheeks, the cement dentists use for their prostheses cakes your face. Besides, it's hard to open your eyes. The guy who embalmed me wasn't exactly a pro, and a white dust drier than the soil itself has taken over a section of your brain. Memory loss, magnesium, limescale. How long does it take for a body to decompose? 6, 8, 10 years? Forensic anthropologists say it depends on humidity. Wanna try? Kill a cat and leave it on a chilly window ledge. See what happens. Can't remember a thing. Your head is so white, as if they'd whitewashed you into a tabula rasa. But the brainwashing has not been thoroughly successful. There's a tiny light at the end of the tunnel. Take that ignited thread between your fingers and pull at the yarn one tug at a time, careful not to break that tenuous thread, so fine and so brittle. You remember a little something, yes. You are capable of building sentences, linking words. You are syntax, pure grammar, an amalgam of words without identity. You will soon recover your memory. This is only a big bout of amnesia. You must have hit your head, surely. Rouse yourself, shake off the listless drone of the newly awake, the savage pain of a tequila hangover, tequila of whatever it was, that distilled poison you used to drink 20-odd years ago. No, you know it already. This won't be easy. It'll be nothing like getting up from a meadow, brushing off blades of grass and whistling Charmanga Riasira down the winding path. It is going to be quite difficult to get out. This is the opening of the novel, and this is when the bones wake up in their grave, and they're kind of like, what happened to us? What happened?
Something like the first story that you wrote when you were a 7-year-old.
You're not wrong there. You're not wrong. Quite dystopian as well. Yeah. I'm dead. Why am I dead?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Anil.